Hello and welcome back to another race update. Now this week I want to focus on this TTT specifically because of how badly I did. Now I gotta say, and you guys know, I have done probably what feels like hundreds of TTTs. Week in, week out. I've barely, missed a week. And if I don't race in the evenings and I race in the mornings and so on and so forth. So I've done a lot of TTTs. So there are often times where I make mistakes, but never this bad. This was absolutely by far my worst TTT. Now, I will say that the team overall did great. This had nothing to do with our leadership or our initial game plan. This was totally just me not performing well, not doing my best. And so, overall we ended up placing third. Just a quick check here to make sure that my braking is turned off, because again, and I think this is where the distractions for my race kind of started. As you see, a little bit off the back, nothing major, but the gap is starting to grow quickly. And so right now I'm doing 45 kilometers an hour and falling back. And so I got to do a surge in order to pick up the pace. And so once I get back on the group, that then becomes a trend of this entire race as I keep falling off the back and I keep having a surge. And I've got to tell you that absolutely wrecked my legs. Absolutely wrecked my legs, left me feeling completely destroyed. Now, this is probably one of the longest TTTs we've done in a long time. And so, and as you see, there I go again, slipping off the back. Now, we did want to maintain a 2 to 3 meter distance between everybody. We wanted to have a nice sharp line. One of the riders who's currently behind me right now, Size Love, is actually part of Eat Dirt 2. And so being able to ride with him, I was, in a way fangirling it, because obviously, he's part of the WTRL World Championship team. They win and beat us all the time. And so I wanted to not only perform well, but I wanted to, the ego in me wanted to make sure that I proved that I am just as good as he is. Now, this was his second TTT for the day, and I didn't learn that until the end of the race. And so, I was like, man, we've got this. We're doing great. Now, our main coach, Brian, absolutely stacked this team. We had a monumental amount of powerhouses. I was the weakest person on this TTT, which goes to show you that how strong this group was. And so, as we're going through and, going through this course, the Three Musketeers, I'm doing my best to try to stay in a line. We are, the plan was to follow an order. Now, they did have a setup where basically like myself and a couple other guys that are the C pace group riders, we would be alternating turns, while the B pace group riders would basically be taking a majority of the turns on the front on the first half of the race, and then the second half of the race we'll start filling in those gaps. And so we kind of talked through that, but it was still, in a way, it was a little bit unclear to me. I'm in the mindset of I'm going to take as many turns as I can. I'm going to jump on the front whenever I can, because if we all pull all the time, then that gives more people some rest. But I do understand that there are some stronger riders. And so as you see, as we're making the left here I go again, falling off the back, and the gap is growing beyond that 5 meter distance, which ultimately leads me to having, now keep in mind, I'm doing 300 watts and falling back. That's how fast we are going. And so I need to surge again to get up to this, to our team. So that way, ultimately it's, because I'm the one that's falling back, it's, my responsibility to bring myself and the people behind me up. And so with the lightning socks achievement there. I actually did at one point pause in the race to equip the lightning socks. So I wanted to check those out, but that wasn't one of the reasons why I fell off the back. So I'm just gonna kind of jump through and show you each time that I fell off the back. All right, so jumping forward, you see I'm starting to get a little bit of distance here. I've got a couple guys, a couple riders behind me, the DW9 riders. And again, because I have people behind me, I'm doing them a disservice by not maintaining my gap, by, allowing myself to get further behind the group than I'd like to, because then they might see that and want to surge up themselves. Now, I was communicating every time, a gap was opening up. I'd let people know, hey, don't worry about it. I'm pulling it back in. Or I'd jump into the gap if I wasn't the one that was that had caused the gap. So that way people are aware not to surge, not to, not they themselves to, burn themselves out. And, unfortunately, that's what happened to me is I did so many of these that I ended up, really, really abusing my legs. And so here we go again on the cobblestones. Gap is starting to grow. Now it's myself and Size Love kind of side by side. Again, he is a way stronger rider than I am. He pushes a little bit hard to start bridging that gap. And as you can see, my fire socks are out because I, need to push equally as hard. Or actually harder to be able to assist with bridging that gap. And ultimately we do come on, and here we go again. And so we're starting to go through the intestines, as they're called. I guess I didn't realize that was their official name, but I've heard a few people talk about it now. And so as you can see, the two riders off the front are starting to pull away, and I'm having to start to push up. Now we are on a steep gradient, and we're 10 11k into the race, so we're not necessarily fresh, but at the same time, as we hit the aqueduct KOM, we're also not, we're not fresh, but we're not hurting at this point. And so I do maintain my position here as we get up the aqueduct, and so that ultimately allows me to kind of keep the pace, but at the same time, I'm pushing 4.2, 4, 4.4, 4.5 going up the aqueduct, which is, a decent pace for me. That's not easy, but at the same time, with 26 kilometers to go, that is yet another instance where I was putting out a lot of effort, and working harder than I had imagined that I would. And here we go. So I'm on the front right now. You see I've got the lightning socks equipped. And so my turn is almost over, and I'm letting the guys know that, hey, I think at this point, I'm still doing a minute turns. As you guys know, that is my preference, to do a minute turn. So I'm starting to ease off. And here's, really a good example of what not to do. When you ease off, you see my power drop from about 4.0, 4.2 around there to 2.4, 2.5. I really should have dropped down to like 3.0. Because as you see, I started falling off the back, and then I ended up kind of sliding off the back very quickly. And so as I got to the back, I ended up having to surge up. Now, we are kind of going through these hills. And so as, we were going through I think the balloon sprint, or whichever sprint that was. But as we were going through there, I ended up falling way off the back. And so now I've got to, make that decision if I'm going to push to catch up, or if I'm going to allow myself to fall further back, because they're not slowing down, and I'm not going to tell them to slow down. I'm not going to allow them to slow down if they ask, or if they suggest, hey, slow down a bit so Miguel can catch. No, I'm going to tell them, keep going. Keep going, because I will, it's my fault. It's my mistake. I will push harder to get up to you guys. And as you can see, it's taking a while. This isn't a 10, 15 second effort. This is that, 1 minute effort, 1 minute plus effort to bridge back onto the group and make sure that, I play my part, because at the end of the day, we've still got more than half the stage left. And so I want to be available for the team to be able to help them, help them get on. And so Size Love, did mention in the chat, he's like, hey, Miguel, essentially he gave himself a gap, so that way I can latch onto his wheel and then push through and kind of push forward. As you can see, he's wearing the WTRL championship helmet, which is the only thing I don't have. I have the jersey, but I don't have the helmet yet. And so again, on the cobbles, pushing forward, and the team is starting to pull away ever so slightly, little by little on these cobbles. At this point, I am, with every turn I take, with every cobblestone segment, every, essentially where the resistance kicks up, you can see I'm doing 4-4, 4-5, 4-6, and I'm not really gaining, I'm starting to, close the gap there, doing 4-4, 4-5, 4-6. That should not be necessary. And that's, again, that is a perfect example of what not to do. When you're doing a TTT, you shouldn't allow yourself to get that far back where you're having to basically match the effort of the person on the front in the wind in order to try and catch up. And so as we hit the end of this sprint, going up this hill, I decided to just kind of, surge as much as I can just to stay with the pace. Because the person up front really wasn't pushing hard, but, going up this hill, we were all kind of falling apart a little bit, and I didn't want to fall too far behind. Now, jumping way forward as we hit the, getting closer to the official intestines. The other one wasn't the intestines, it was the aqueduct climb. But as we get here, as you see, we've got 3 riders off the front, 3 or 4 riders off the front that are starting to pull away. And again, I'm stuck in the middle, not allowing myself to stay on them. And so the riders behind me, specifically, Coffee Snob, Harry, and Size Love. Obviously, Size Love has the engine to, handle these kind of surges. And at the end, he did comment. He was like, "Hey, this was, he's like, I think we averaged 44 kilometers an hour, and his morning race they averaged like 46 kilometers an hour. So he's like, yeah, it was a good kind of sort of rest type ride." And I was like, "Oh, burn, like, total burn." But at the end of the day, it's those instances where I kept pushing myself and kept falling back, kept having a surge up, which required other people to have to surge up. That ultimately I feel like hurt my effort, hurt others' efforts. We were working harder than necessary at instances. And so here we go again. We're still in the intestines here, getting towards the end of it. And as we're hitting this downhill, I start to fall off those front 2 riders, and kind of slip through, and everyone's kind of pushing through. And this has happened to me a few times going downhill where I end up losing touch with the riders in front of me. And I feel like I have to work harder going downhill, even though, at 80, I think 586 kilograms in this race, I don't feel like it should have been that hard to keep up, especially since most of us are kind of around the same weight. There's a couple, maybe heavier riders and a couple lighter riders, but, we're all pretty decent. And so as you can see, I get on terms with the group and catch back up, but it's just yet again another example of what not to do. And as we make our way to the top of this hill, it's the effort's starting to mount. My legs are starting to be ultra fatigued. You can see I'm pushing hard and not really maintaining a good posture. And so as we get over the intestines again, I start to, again, as we're heading downhill, start to fall off the back of these 2. And, that is ultimately hurting me. I can't say it enough. It's been hurting me this whole race, and truly, absolutely unnecessary. And again, this was my mistake. I should have done better. And I think, the one thing you're not going to see, because this is edited, is as we got towards the end of the race, I did maintain my pace with the team better. I was holding on better, not falling off the back as much. But as we're getting closer to the end now, it started happening more and more because I was just that burnt out. I really was struggling to stay on with the group. And so as I finish my turn here, again, I'm slow rolling back. As you can see, my wattage dropped almost to nothing. And then I slowly picked it back up. I did a little bit better, but it came too late. Basically, I ended up falling off the back and having to surge up again with my lightning socks, which really doesn't help out at all. And I've got to say, and I want to pose a question to you guys. What do you think about the lightning socks? Do you like those better than the fire socks? I personally like the fire socks. I think they're better after riding with the lightning socks a couple stages. I feel like, they're nice. It's kind of like, it makes me think of in one of the Thor movies, where, oh, it's Thor Ragnarok, where they're making fun of him for having, shooting sparks from his fingers. That's what it kind of makes me think of. It's like, oh, the wheels sparkle. But it's not the same as like the fire socks where you leave that nice long streak, kind of like in Back to the Future. And so as we start to get to the end here, again, I am just falling apart. One of our guys is, already off the back 18 seconds. And again, I feel like a lot of that had to do with my surging, because he was surging with me at times. And I feel like, I just made him, did him a disservice by, not doing my part in keeping up with the group. And so as we get towards the end here with 1.1 kilometers to go, we've got a couple off the back. So small group coming up. I'm, rider number 6, I think, right now. And so as we start approaching the end, I know what sprint we're heading towards. And as you can see, the gap is starting to grow. And, even though I'm doing 4.6, or I was doing 4.6, kind of hovering the upper threes, lower fours, I was cooked. I, stopped pedaling. They started pulling away. I thought I could, kick and give a good surge. But at this point, my legs were literally shaking from the pain. And I was like, you know what? I'm not number 4. So I'm just going to let them go. I'm not gonna stress myself out over it. Obviously, I'm talking about it now partly because it's a lesson learned, of what not to do. While I do my best to give a final surge because I don't want to fall too far behind. I did my best to give a final surge. At the end of the day, not my best performance. Not at all what I would have expected myself for the team, because the team does deserve better. DW9 is a fantastic team to be on, and then having, a guest superstar, as it were, in Size Love, someone who, holds the WTRL TTT championship title. I feel like I could have done better. I could have performed better, and set a better example, but it is what it is. Live to ride another day. And so that is what I did. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it. And on to the next race. Oh, by the way, we did get 3rd place. And so here we are, another club ladder race with the TFC Mercs. And I've got to say, boy, oh boy, oh boy, were my legs hurting. Because this was the day after the TTTs. And I was, I went into it optimistic. I was like, you know what? We've raced them before. We know we can win. They've got Pole Hill, which is by far the strongest ladder racer, I think, ever. I honestly don't understand why we're in the same league. Because he really is that strong. And he could be, I think he should be racing up, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. I know there's a range when it comes to ladder racing. There's a range that you can race with, and so he's just at the higher end of our category. So as we kick off here in the Outer Scotland course, 1 of 2 laps. Again, I was at this point coming through here. I was already like, all right, I feel it in my legs. My legs are hurting. I know I've got to, I love the Scotland, courses. I've done excellent on these courses. I've won a lot of races on these courses. Um, and so I know that I can perform well, but perform well with super fatigued legs, with what felt like no recovery at all. And this was, again, you know, probably one of the first times I felt like from one day to the next, you know, I did not come full circle where I can, feel good in another race. And, it shows, and it truly shows. So I'm going to jump forward to basically where everything starts to fall apart. Now, as we start to get to the castle, you see the pace is pushing up. We're hitting almost 60 kilometers an hour on that little downhill slope. And as we start to hit this is basically where everybody surges, especially when it comes to a ladder race. This is, a strategic point in the race where you can 100% change the course of how a race goes, because some people are going to fall off the back, some people are going to surge up off the front and create a gap. But this was the first instance where I was like, all right, my legs are hurting and I don't know how I'm going to do on this race. And so as you can see, starting to fall back a little bit, so I need to surge up in order to stay on the back of this group, because again, I did not want to make the same mistake as I did yesterday or the day prior for the TTTs. I wanted to be able to keep up with this group for as long as possible. Now, jumping forward as we get back into Glasgow, we start to hang this left, and after that ramp up, I did fall off the back a little bit, but I was able to kind of hold back on. And so as we start to get, start to come up towards the Clyde, I'm ever so slightly off the back, and I'm starting to feel it. And again, this is kind of where I'm, looking at how my legs are doing. As you can see, I popped my draft already. And that's, again, like I've mentioned to you guys, this is not a strategic point to use your draft, because there really is nothing special about this terrain that would really benefit the draft. It was truly just my legs were hurting and I didn't know whether or not I could keep up on the Clyde. And so I start to push up and kind of hold my position. You see I'm doing about, I was doing about 4 watts or so per kilogram, and then as we hit the second part of this slope, everyone's starting to surge off the front. You see the fire socks going, you see my lightning socks going. I'm pushing hard and trying to, there's a gap forming in front. So I've got 2 TFC riders behind me, and I figured, or OTR, sorry. I said TFC earlier, didn't I? Yeah, it's the OTR team. Sorry, guys. And so, as they start to, come over the front, I was thinking like, all right, as I come down this hill, I can surge going up this hill and I'll be able to, catch them. And as we start getting up this hill, I'm closing the gap a little bit, but it's really not happening. As you can see, I stopped pedaling again because I am absolutely in pain. And so as we start getting over these, these little bumps, the gap is starting to grow little by little. And even though I'm surging and the guys are encouraging me on Discord to, keep pushing, everyone starts pulling away from me. And at this point, my legs were done. And we're not even finished with the first lap. That was the frustrating part about this, is we weren't even finished with the first lap. And I lost touch and lost hope, really. Like I was so frustrated because I knew I've done better. I knew I could do better, but I just didn't. I didn't have it in me. I tried surging up one more time to see if I can close this gap and kind of pull a Zwifty maneuver. But as you see, I stopped pedaling again because I'm turning over the pedals, but my quads are absolutely on fire. Absolutely on fire. And so as I get up this hill, at this point, I already start kind of coming to grips with the fact that they're going to leave me behind. And the only thing I can do right now is just, finish the race and, hope that that one point doesn't ruin our, our chances to win. Because right now it's really, the burden now becomes on the team to make sure that they get the best points possible, because it's a 5-on-4, essentially up ahead. And so I keep kind of doing these surges to see if I can, bring myself forward, but it's just not happening. And so jumping way forward to the last couple hundred meters here, just slow rolling in. The team has already come across the line, and thankfully they did an excellent job. We did beat the OTR Swagger team by 1 point. By 1 point, which is the reason why you always finish a race no matter what. Because if you don't, then the team doesn't get that point. And so we ended up winning by 1 point. Thankfully, our guys pulled through, did some great work, and raced well. And so after doing the tiny races on Saturday, which I will link to that video, go check it out. It was absolutely dreadful. I did well. I did place a top 10 in one of the races, but at the end of the day, after that race, I truly was, it's the first time in a really long time where I was like, all right, I need to take a few days off because my legs absolutely could not. And so as we kick off this ladder race, this is a dirt on dirt racing team. It is Dirty Crabz versus Dirty Deuces, and you'll see familiar names in basically all of these because we all kind of raced together at one point. But the name that I want to point out is Mr. Mike Bell is in this race. He's on the Dirty Deuces. And I got to say, going into this race, I was like, all right, I know his his racing style. He's a really great climber, strong climber. He's got a good, 20-minute power. So I know that as long as we all stay together and we make it through the hills, then we'll be able to beat him on a sprint. And, they do have some strong sprinters, but a lot of their guys are also, great when it comes to the long distance power. And so as you can see, Mike is off the front right now. And it really, the only thing I can think of was he's off the front because this downhill, he doesn't want to get dropped. And if he doesn't want to get dropped on this downhill, then, we'll essentially catch up to him. We'll catch up to him on the downhill, and then he'll kind of push through on the uphill parts of this Richmond course, which is ultimately what ends up happening. And so, as we start rolling through here, you can see that immediately, we start to get onto his wheel and kind of, roll through. So he's got to be able to basically latch back on as we pass by, because the last thing he wants to do is end up falling off the back. Because as you guys saw from my previous races, it is not fun. Having that experience is not fun. And so as we start to hit the base of this climb, I got to say, I did some things, kind of went into my strategy book and kind of looked at, all right, what do I need to do? This is my first race back after the tiny races. So essentially had about, 3 days off, 2.5, something like that, whatever it was. And so I'm feeling good. Don't have many kilometers on my legs, which I generally don't like racing with fresh legs. I feel like I do better after a race or two. And so as we start to hit this hill, I knew that if I did not keep up on this first hill, I was going to be cooked. I was absolutely going to be cooked because these back-to-back hills, specifically the second hill, is really where the most damage is done. Because this first hill, we're barely, we're not even 2 kilometers into the race and hitting this hill. So our legs are absolutely fresh as they're going to be. Now, you can see my camera on the left adjusted a little bit. I did find an OBS plugin that basically it does motion capture or object detection, and then kind of adjust the camera. It can crop in on the object detection. So I'm kind of playing with that. It doesn't look quite as good as I thought it would. But I'll keep messing with it to see if I can make it better. If not, find a better plugin for it. But as you can see, as we get to the top of this hill, we're all kind of together. You got Preston off the back, a couple seconds, about 3 seconds or so off the back. And I did let the team know that, so that way they're aware, because that's always, anytime someone starts to fall off the back, it's a good opportunity to, push harder. So you can create a little bit more of a gap and make them work even harder to latch back on. And so as we hit this falls flat and get ready to go on to the next hill. I'm just going to kind of fast forward to, the next kind of decision point in this race. Because again, I really wanted to focus this video on the TTT in the beginning instead of the rest of these races. And so as we start to hit this hill, this is the next kind of major point in this course where it is advantageous to make a move. As you can see, there's a couple guys off the front. These two guys, the two deuces start to go off the front. One of our guys starts to follow, and I'm doing 4.5, almost 5 watts per kilogram, and not even keeping up. I start to push a little bit harder into the lower fives. I use my draft to see if that could help me, because as you can see from my draft gauge, we are still getting draft on this 5% climb. I'm getting about 35 watts or so, give or take. And so as we start to hit the top here, I am just doing my best to keep up. I do maintain a little bit of a gap, not too far, a couple seconds, but as you can see, the gap is starting to grow as we hit this flat. I, decide to kind of rest my legs a little bit, because I knew as we start to hit this next surge, my thought was, okay, if these guys are pushing a little harder, when they hit this, maybe they'll either stay the same or slow down. And if I can just, kind of match their effort or do a little bit harder effort, it's not that steep or as long of a climb. And so it's probably a 1 minute effort, if that. And so as I start to hit this, 3%, I'm doing about 3 watts per kilogram, give or take, a percentage here or there. And then I start to kick up a little bit harder. But again, as, I'm pushing up into the, mid threes, the gap is just growing and growing. And again, I'm looking at, when I was doing this, I did take a peek at my heart rate. So my heart rate's in the 180s, but I felt good. So it's not like I was fatigued. My legs were sore, yeah, but I felt good. I felt like I had the energy to go. And so at this point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to maintain this pace, kind of the upper threes, lower fours, in order to get over the top. I didn't want to fall too far behind. As you can see, Mike is actually about 11 seconds behind us now. And they've got, Preston behind them, or behind him. And so I know that if I stay where I'm at, we'll be good. Points wise, we'll be good. And so I cross over the top of this, doing a little over 4 watts per kilogram. And at this point, now it goes from racing strategy of I need to, be able to help the team break, essentially break the other guys. Because right now it's a, 3-on-2. 2 of the deuces and 3 of our guys are up front. And it really is up to the deuces to kind of make the moves. They're the ones that are going to need to be more strategic, so that way their guys can get as many points as possible. For me, my race is don't let Mike catch me. And if I can bridge, I bridge. And that's kind of what it came down to. Is I'm 25 seconds and I was like, you know what? Ironically, we're still in the lead-in for this race, but as we kind of hit that, I'm like, you know what? 25 seconds, I can bridge that gap. Like, I can just keep on this. I can work on my 20-minute power, stay in that 3.0 to 3.5 range, and just really work on, keeping my momentum. I'm doing about, I was averaging 39 to 42 kilometers an hour. And so I figured if I can stay in that range, then I will, take a second here and there to keep taking seconds back. And as I keep taking seconds back, then ultimately I'll be able to latch on to, the back of that front group. And if I can stay on the back of that front group, then I can, work on the sprint at the end. But again, the goal was, because, on Discord, we did talk about it. The guys were like, hey, if you can bridge, great. If not, let us know. And I told them, I was like, look, keep going. Keep going. I will do my best to bridge. If I can bridge, I will. Don't slow down. Keep working the front. If they're not gonna push, then then you don't need to push. But if they are gonna push, then you work the front. I will manage where I'm at. And so as you can see, the gap came down ever so slightly, a couple seconds. But again, the gap from me to Mike is also coming down, because he is an absolute monster, and truly, like, he did the time trial of his life. So I'm going to jump forward again so you can see, you know, if you look at look at the time marker right now, it's, 15:20. Now watch when he makes a catch. And so here we are at 20:30, we'll call it. Basically, within a 5-minute time frame, he closed down a near 20-second gap and just absolutely TTT'd like a monster. And so at this point, I'd gotten close because the guy slowed down a little bit. I'd gotten close, but and then Dan from the Deuces saw what I was doing, and ended up, surging up front, and that ultimately created an instance where, our guys ended up pushing forward a little bit harder, and then they opened up, the gap opened up even more. And so they're, right around 30 seconds ahead of me. Mike's coming up now 2 seconds, in about 2 seconds. And so at this point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to let Mike catch me. I'm going to do my best to stay on his wheel, because at this point, I'm not going to work any harder. I was time trialing it, but I am not the ITT guy. So I, you know, I was suffering. And so he passes me on the right. I, you know, and he, not only did he pass me, but he sprinted past me, which was just absolutely smart move to do. Truly give him credit for that, because he did the right thing in not letting me just latch back on right away. He sprinted past me, which made me have to kind of fight to get to his wheel. And so I was like, all right, I need to sprint up to catch him, lit up the lightning socks. And, he did not make it easy. He was not slowing down. As you can see, he's doing 4 watts per kilogram. I'm surging up to 6 watts per kilogram, trying to latch back on. And as I get close, I like to kind of do like a 90-10, like in the movie Hitch. I'll go 90% and then let them allow the 10% to happen naturally. And so I will start to soft pedal or stop pedaling altogether as I start to get into the draft. And so as I get onto Mike's draft here, I am just cruising. And that was, my focus from here on out. The guys essentially saw that that Mike and I were together, and they were like, hey, let him pull, coast, do whatever you need to do, shut down any attacks if he does any. And, from then on out, just focus on the end sprint. I've got 3 kilometers left till the final sprint here. So that's, really where we wanted to, where we wanted this race to go. And so as we start to go forward, I'm going to fast forward a little bit for time's sake, so that way you can see, because again, at this point, I am just going to stay on his wheel. I'm going to, ease up as best I can. I'm not going to push myself off the front. Now, his avatar did a weird thing there. It kind of like kept bouncing around me, and I thought he had steering. I initially thought, oh, maybe he has steering now, and when it was steering, it was just kind of kicking him back and forth. And as you can see, he's surging off the front again as we hit this 1% incline. So I have to surge to keep on his wheel. And, he does that repeatedly. And like I messaged him afterwards, had he have kept doing that, he would have beat me, because those, little attacks, again, you see him pulling away little by little, and I'm having to, push the watts up, not very hard, but push the watts up just to stay on his wheel. We kind of were playing that cat and mouse game. Now, every time I would get in front of him, I would ease off the back, and here he goes again, sprinting up, pushing off hard, 8 watts per kilogram, in order for me to catch back up. And so as I catch back up, I ease off, and here Mike goes again, pulling away. And this, he kept on doing this little by little, and that kept wearing my legs down, man. I was, as you can see, I stop and I'm kind of heavy breathing, and I'm like, all right, I know I've got a kilometer left. The best thing I can do is, figure out a point where I can sprint. Because at this point, I feel like he wasn't going to try to, he knew that it was going to come down to a sprint between he and I. And so as you can see, I did him dirty by pulling out to the left, knowing he doesn't actually have steering. So I pull out to the left to put him in the wind, because I was not going to let him, essentially stay behind me in my draft. Um, Again, this is a race, and so that's kind of how things work. So as we hit the 700-meter mark, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have to push. I spike up. Oh, I did. I thought I didn't hit over 1,000 watts, but apparently I did on that initial surge. And then I, kind of evened out there around 500-600 watts, and just kind of, I was like, you know what? I started to create a gap. I've got about 1 second right now. I pushed again. Gave a second kick, and I was looking at his name and saw that the distance was growing little by little. And so as I saw the distance growing, I was like, you know what? Got a couple seconds on him. If he's not going to, surge to try and catch up to me, then I'm not going to worry about sprinting hard at the end. And I was, when I saw that the gap kept growing, I was like, great. He's not going to sprint to get me. He's at this point he was done. And like I said, had he have done a couple more surges, have we had more distance in the race, and he did a couple more surges, I don't think I would have been able to sprint. My legs were absolutely cooked, and so I crossed the line in sixth place. As you can see, Riz, not shockingly crosses in first place. Absolutely strong sprinter. And so the Deuces did a fantastic job in this race. They truly are a great team, and like I've mentioned before, we've raced with them on the same team in various races. So it's not like, we're our teams are very evenly matched, as you can see by the results. Our teams are very evenly matched. We just had the better day today. And so it was a great race, absolutely fun. I know points wise, I'm pretty certain we took the points. As you can see, us getting, first, third, fourth, and then me coming across in sixth. That should have been enough points wise for us to get the win. And yeah, like I said, fantastic race. Great racing with, amongst friends. And then, doing some smack talking in Discord afterwards. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Please jump in the Discord community. The link's in the description. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this type of racing, hit us up. There's always room for people on any of the teams that I ride with. And yeah, I will catch you guys on the next episode. Hey guys, it's Miguel from that thing you just watched. Hope you enjoyed that video, whether it was topic on nutrition or racing or a combination of both. Feel free to come back. I will continue to put out videos like this and continue to showcase what you can do with smart nutritional strategies, combining that with racing, because that is what this channel is all about. And feel free to check in if you want to see more racing. Click on wherever the link's at, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next race.